Israel's ambassador to Washington says a ceasefire deal to end fighting with Hezbollah in Lebanon could be close. The Iran-backed militant group began attacking Israel in October last year following Hamas's raid on southern Israel. The fighting escalated into all-out war in September, with the Israeli military conducting a massive campaign of airstrikes on Lebanon as well as a ground incursion. Now, the parties appear to be on the verge of an agreement to end the conflict.
The moment an Israeli rocket hits its target in southern Beirut, Israel has intensified its campaign against Hezbollah in recent weeks amid an international push for a ceasefire. The diplomatic efforts have been led by US envoy Amos Hochstein, who visited both Beirut and Tel Aviv last week. The US brokered deal to end the fighting calls for an initial 60-day ceasefire. In the first stage, fighting would end and Hezbollah would move its fighters and arms north of the Litani River. Israel would then withdraw its forces from southern Lebanon. The Lebanese army would move into the buffer zone to prevent that Hezbollah returns, along with an existing UN peacekeeping force. Negotiations would follow on the demarcation between the two countries, known as the Blue Line. The deal is based on a UN resolution from 2006, which both Hezbollah and Israel have violated. Under the new agreement, a US-led committee would monitor the implementation of the ceasefire and the UN resolution. Hezbollah had long made a cessation of violence in Gaza a condition of a deal, but have since dropped the demand. But there have been other sticking points. To prevent Hezbollah from rearming and killing more Israelis, Israel wants the freedom to take action in the future. Foreign Minister Gideon Saar said the agreement hinged on enforcement that would keep Hezbollah away from the border and disarmed in all of Lebanon. According to media reports, the US has given Israel guarantees recognizing its right to take military action against imminent threats from Lebanon.
Behnam Ben Taleblu is a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies and joins us from London. Good to have you on the program, Behnam. Now, how likely is it that we'll see the ceasefire in the coming days?
It's a pleasure to be with you. That's the million-dollar question right now. There's lots of reports saying that the cabinet, the Israeli National Security Cabinet, will be convening as early as Tuesday, so just within a few hours, to discuss this proposal in earnest. So it could be within a matter of hours. It could be within a matter of weeks if some of those final sticking points about not just the text of this ceasefire, but the enforcement mechanism and some of those security guarantees you had alluded to in the earlier package are not met or ironed out.
I mean, some of those include, for example, Israel still wanting to be able to strike southern Lebanon. How would that work with a ceasefire?
Well, one of the areas that I've been looking at is how would Israel try to prevent the resupply, the rearming of Lebanese Hezbollah, either indirectly via Iran through Syria or directly via Russia, via Syria to Lebanese Hezbollah. This is likely something that Israel does not want to allow to be a repeat of, which is the post-2006 war scenario, where there was a ceasefire, then there was a UN resolution, and there was a political agreement, and there was an inability to enforce it. So coupled with some of those U.S. security guarantees, freedom of military action, be it against Iran-backed targets in Syria or be it against Lebanese Hezbollah on Lebanese territory proper, is probably the only way the Israelis will feel confident that they will not have a repeat of the post-2006 situation, which is a slow, steady creep and buildup in military capability of, again, Tehran's proxy to Israel's north.
I mean, meanwhile, Hezbollah maintained that it would fight for as long as Israel carried out its war in Gaza. Now, what's changed?
I'm very glad you mentioned that, because if there is any political accomplishment here through the use of military means by the Israelis against Hezbollah, which began firing at Israel less than one day after the October 7 terrorist attack last year, meaning on October 8th, it is precisely what you mentioned, which is Israel's ability to use military force to de-link a ceasefire or a cessation of hostilities by Lebanese Hezbollah with the situation on the ground to Israel's south in Gaza and with the war with Hamas. As we know, Hezbollah was the first of the multiple Iran-backed proxies in the region to begin to widen the war, to try to find a way to bail out Tehran's proxy in the Levant, which is also Hamas. The inability of Hezbollah, some of the militias in Iraq and Syria, as well as the Houthis in Yemen, to be able to prevent Israeli military success in Gaza, coupled with a steep escalation we saw in late summer, early fall by the Israelis against Lebanese Hezbollah, proved that conventional military capability carried the day. And this, coupled with, of course, some of the decapitation strikes and precision-guided munition stockpile depletions that we saw in September and October by the Israelis on Lebanese territory, also led to, in my view, this political change in Hezbollah's position.
How would a ceasefire serve Iran's interests?
This is also a critical question because the Islamic Republic of Iran often plays the long game here. And it is, rumored that Tehran may even be able to benefit from a ceasefire. And that's something the Israelis are going to have to keep their eyes on, not in the short term with deconfliction and with the Lebanese armed forces moving into the buffer zone, not there, but potentially with how Tehran can use the post-war scenario, the chaos that exists in any country whenever there is a cessation of military conflict, to be able to cement its gains, to be able to resupply politically, militarily, and economically Lebanese Hezbollah and go into the rubble, if you will, and rebuild, part of its most important crown jewel, the proxy Lebanese Hezbollah, again, in the Levant. So this is a longer-term Israeli concern about trying to find ways to prevent this resupply. And Tehran, unfortunately, in the past, has been able to capitalize on precisely these periods.
And what about the U.S.? We're seeing, of course, the new administration coming in. This transition period, how is that playing on what's happening in terms of these talks?
Well, we're in a very critical time right now. There's lots of moving pieces for the Biden administration's transition period. In fact, some might even say more active or more meaningful pieces on the chessboard than we saw in the past few months, even prior to the election. And there's a couple different theaters here. One, certainly there's Ukraine, Russia, where they authorized the use of ATACMS ballistic missiles to be able to strike on Russian territory. Two, there's diplomatic action against the Islamic Republic with European partners at the International Atomic Energy Agency. And three, precisely where you mentioned, there is the cobbling together of these forces for some kind of a ceasefire agreement. And together, some of this stuff can help put leverage back on the U.S. side of the ledger come January 2025. But that leverage will no longer be in the hands of the Democratic administration. That will be transitioned over into the hands of the Donald Trump administration, who is likely to see the lens through not just the post-October 7 Middle East, but also to see the region through the lens of how to counter Iran through the auspices of a resurrected maximum pressure campaign.
Behnam and Taleblu from the Foundation for Defense and Democracies, thank you for your time and insights.
Thank you.